In today's video, I'm going to talk about 5 main reasons why I believe that the vast majority of people applying for Amazon jobs underestimate the preparation it takes to get through such an interviewing process, which, by the way, it's well known as one of the toughest application processes, and hopefully provide you with some interesting insight to prevent you to avoid some of these most common pitfalls for this. The first scenario that I want to talk about here is that many people tend to prepare for the leadership principles, their famous 14 leadership principles, but actually forget to polish up their technical part. And more often than not, this actually happens for the second phone interview, because what happens during the first phone interview is that they're getting asked a few behavioral questions and they notice, hey, I'm not that well prepared for the behavioral part of the interview, and this is something new and it's something exciting, and they spend all their time preparing for the behavioral part of the Amazon interview, and then boom, in the second interview they only get asked technical questions which they cannot remember specifics about. This would be something that I hear a lot quite often, and this has also been reported many times in this YouTube channel. The second scenario that happens here that is also maybe not that counterintuitive, but still it is a scenario, is that people who are really technical, who really do not take the time to read those 14 leadership principles and understand, a bit more on those, and I'm talking about the first steps on the interviewing process, the first and also the second interview to some extent. So if you are applying for an Amazon job, you should know they are really serious about their 14 leadership principles, and I have a ton of videos on this channel around this topic. Now, what you should be learning about this, I have another list, for example, with the 35 most commonly asked questions during an Amazon interview. So these would be a good place to start, but still I would say that I would very much advise you to read those principles at least 3 times to understand the behaviors in each of the 14 of them, and try answering a few questions. And if you've never done behavioral interviewing before, try role-playing definitely with someone before going to an interview. This would be the second, like being technical and focusing only on the technical part and not preparing the principles. The third scenario that I want to talk here is a rather counterintuitive one, but yeah. So let's say a candidate works for 20 years in the same job. They have a great career at a well-known company, but not a cutting-edge company, and they apply for a job at Amazon. But not only they don't apply for a similar job, but they are looking for a career progression. That is to apply for a more senior job at Amazon, given the fact that they have 20 years of experience in the current role. And what happens here is that pretty much in 95% of cases that I coach people in these scenarios, these people don't realize the leadership component of an Amazon interview. So whenever you're looking for a pretty serious job at Amazon, leadership really makes 50% of that process. And more often than not, if you haven't worked for these FANG companies, your leadership component is not that great, which basically means that you must spend weeks to tune that up and to really prepare for weeks for these things. And I'm seriously talking to you here. Like, even if you're just preparing for a first phone interview, the preparation process is quite broad, because you're actually looking for a career progression into one of the most innovative companies in the world. So their interest to hire you is very low, because why would they hire you when they have a ton of other, maybe internal candidates, maybe candidates from other FANG companies around? And this is what my point is, that you have to be very careful if you're looking for a career progression when you worked in a not cutting edge company. The bar is very high there, so you should really ensure that you are the right candidate for the job. And this is why I believe where many people underestimate the difficulty of the application process there. The fourth scenario that I have here is that there are a ton of people who make it all the way through the loop and then only prepare for the loop during the last 3 days, or maybe 4 days if you want, or even 5 days if you want. To be honest with you, I don't know many people who got hired that only prepared for 3 or 4 or 5 days. Like, okay, you could argue, okay, but I could spend 1 month, but still my skills won't improve. Well, yes, they would. Actually, they would. And you shouldn't over-exaggerate with these things. But what happens is, if you don't spend 10 days to 2 weeks to prepare for the loop, either you'll have too few stories and you'll start repeating them, either you'll block easily while getting asked tough questions, either you'll just show up there and you won't have the required confidence in the process. And during five rounds of interviews in the same day, more often than not, this shows. And I guess the main takeaway here, you need 10 days, at least 2 weeks to get these things properly. So this is something you should also keep in mind. And finally, the fifth scenario that I want to touch upon here are false positives. So what's a false positive in an interview? Well, it's when you feel, for example, that your interview goes great and everyone is supporting of you and you believe your answers are extraordinary, and then you get rejected. And by the way, they never mentioned the rejection cause, and you are surprised. Well, I mean, if you'll know anything about the interviewing, is that the more you build trust with someone, the more information they give to you. So they have no reason why not to be supportive with you throughout the interview, to obtain as much information as possible in order to properly assess your competency for the role, and of course the leadership component, and to score you against those 14 leadership principles. So be careful about this scenario, because it's a very common one. And similarly, if the interviewer is tough on you and they ask you a ton of follow-up questions and you feel like the conversation doesn't evolve well, you just have that feeling, that could be as well a false track, simply because that person could be the bar raiser in most cases. But by diving deeper into something and asking you follow-up questions, it doesn't mean your answers were bad or superficial previously. It could simply mean that the interviewer is genuinely interested to know more about you and from getting you from good to great answers. And you'll be surprised on the number of people that tell me, hey, Dan, I think I've done poorly in the interview because, they were really, really tough on me, and I really felt like, I was all the way in a corner, trying to manage each and every question of them. And then they found out they got an offer. So be very careful about these false positives and about these interviewing techniques, because they are masters of interviewing. They are very good at these things, and so you should. So this is why probably you should take the preparation process seriously. So there you go. I hope you found these 5 scenarios useful if you prepare for an Amazon interview or maybe other interviews for this reason. So as always, hope you found this content useful, and thank you very much for watching.